Hi everybody. Yesterday I published this document here. Neidle says Ian Clifford's 4.4 million signature credit recoupment confirmed by an IRS wages and tax transcript is a fantasy. So this is what Neidle is saying. So just to give it a little bit of context, Neidle's been publishing blogs for a couple of years now, informing anyone who wants to read them, and he's got quite a big audience. I'm apparently, according to Dan Neidle, I'm a pseudo free man on the land, sovereign citizen that basically is a tax fraudster. Not only that, but I'm on the run in North Cyprus because I'm wanted by the authorities. So that's basically the story that Neidle's been putting out there, and there's a very good reason why he's been employed to put this information out. Basically, the British establishment, and in particular the financial services establishment, don't want people to know how the money system really works. So because I'm a whistleblower from 2008, when I had my firm that I created called Integrity, had a joint venture with HBOS, the bank that's now called Lloyds Bank, because of the fact that I blew the whistle and lots of other things which you can read about if you're interested in other documents I've published on this channel. Because of the fact that I'm a whistleblower, I am revealing what the establishment, the financial services establishment, don't want you to know. And primarily, what they don't want you to know is that you create the credit by using your signature. Your signature is creating the credit. And I have engineered over many years of study and then building a A through Z process, facilitated process with a lot of other people involved. I have built a process that enables you to recoup your abandoned signature credit. So what do I mean by that? That's bank payments, that is the face value of mortgages, loans, credit cards, even the PAYE deductions or W2 deductions on remuneration, and many other things as well. But the main ones is bank payments, mortgages, loans and credit cards. And you can recoup the abandoned signature credit all the way back from the age of 18 or 21, depending on which country you're in. You can do this in just about every country. There's only one or two exceptions to that. And we have thousands of people already in a program doing this. And my goal is to recruit around about 100,000 for our Republic of Old Souls community. And that community under the Old Souls Nation will apply for sovereign nation status with its own infrastructure, its own power, water, food, its own communications, its own travel, its own everything. And that's because many people out there, of which we have thousands, have woken up to the fact that there is a control agenda, and many people don't want to be controlled within that agenda. It's not for me to go into it today on this video because it would take too long, but that's the background to what's been going on. Now, we have had success with signature credit recoupment in 2024. We had success. We had multiple of our membership receiving banned credit recoupment. In 2025, there was success. And then we got to September of 2025, and the head of our fiduciary department, a lady called Amy Sanger, sabotaged 3,000 of our members' signature credit recoupment because she had been reading Dan Neidle's blogs where he was saying that what I am doing, my methodology, is tax fraud. I'm pseudo law nutter, I'm sovereign citizen, I'm a free man on the land according to Dan Neidle. So she got very spooked by this and she was very deeply in debt. So she stole the reserve that was underpinning the Republic of Old Souls. And then she filed fraud identification reports to the IRS for 3,000 grantor trusts because she wanted to get out of what she thought was a tax fraud because of what Neidle's been saying. Now, it suited her to do that. There's all sorts of reasons why she did that, personal reasons. It's all in my other documents. But the bottom line is that Neidle caused at the time, 600 million confirmed by the IRS recoupments were undermined by Neidle's influence over Amy Sanger and others. There were 36 trustees spread across the 3,000 grantor trusts, and because of Neidle's misinformation, because he's been employed by the establishment to put misinformation out there, because of that misinformation that Neidle had put out there, that sabotage event happened. That's caused massive amount of distress for the members of what was Matrix Freedom, who were seeking this signature credit recoupment to change their lives, to pay off their debts, to improve their lot, pay their taxes, pay their debts, etc., perfectly lawfully. Suddenly they couldn't get access to those recoupments, which they'd been waiting for in some cases for 18 months. Some people was a year, some people was 18 months as we were working on the process, etc., etc. It's quite a busy and detailed process and a lot of infrastructure to build. So they were very, very upset when their recoupments were undermined, obviously, as you would imagine. Now, then what happens is that I get into a dialogue with Dan Neidle through Ecclesia Law, who I write all the technical papers. Ecclesia Law here. I write all the technical papers for Ecclesia Law, and if you go to the Ecclesia Law website, you'll see that I've written over 50 technical papers which absolutely demonstrate that I'm not a pseudo-law nutter. I am not a free man on the land. I am definitely not a sovereign citizen, and I am 100% capable of figuring out complex financial models. I've been doing it all my career. I've been doing it for over 40 years, and I have won awards for it. I've built many, many financial services organisations. I was close to one of the richest guys in the UK in and around 2007, 2008, before I blew the whistle on HBOS, HBOS Halifax Bank of Scotland, who I had a joint venture with, my firm, which was the third largest of its type in the UK at the time. And ever since then, there's been a destruction of my credentials, of my reputation, because the British establishment do not want people to listen to me, because I'm too dangerous for them, because I figure out too many ways to give people relief and remedy from their problems. And that is the very, very short story. It's been going on 16 years. It's coming to a head very, very soon. And Dan Neidle was employed by the establishment. He is their agent, he is their proxy, to push even more propaganda out about me, to try and get people not to listen to me. And that's basically what's been going on. So there was this dialogue started between Ecclesia Law and Dan Neidle over the last 6 to 8 weeks, or thereabouts. There's been about 30 exchanges, and Dan Neidle starts off with, it's all fraud, you don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Ecclesia Law writes to Dan Neidle on emails with all the technical reasons why what signature credit is perfectly lawful. I write all those technical papers, they all get sent to Neidle. He won't engage technically on whether they are real or not, whether the information is reliable or not, because he knows he's way out of his depth. You see, people like Dan Neidle, who went to conventional university, who went to, did various tax courses, and then was fast-tracked up to becoming a partner and the head of tax for Clifford Trust, they can't possibly, someone like Dan Neidle can't possibly know this information that I publish in my research reports, because it completely undermines the information that Dan Neidle has been absorbing from the universities, the tax courses, the financial services courses that he's been on. As I was, 15, 20 years ago, I was completely brainwashed into believing the system works a certain way. I've now unpacked it and I can see exactly how it works, which is the complete opposite way around. So Neidle, you see, is suffering from being programmed in the system. I've woken up to how things work. I've got the ability to understand complex financial models. I've unpacked it all, and I have figured out exactly how the system works, which, of course, Dan Neidle has never been taught, and he's probably not bright enough to be able to figure it out, even though he was the head of tax at a prestigious magic circle law firm like Clifford Trust, which, by the way, my firm, which Dan Neidle probably doesn't know, my firm actually employed Clifford Chance and had them on retainer for quite some time. And I don't think Dan Neidle is aware of that I used to pay substantial amounts through the firm that I created to Clifford Chance whilst Dan Neidle was the head of tax. So he probably doesn't know that, because that doesn't fit his narrative of Ian Clifford is a pseudo-law free man on the land, sovereign citizen, tax fraudster. He probably won't want to admit that my firm paid Clifford Chance, as it did with DLA Piper, which is another big law firm in London, as it did with Rosenblatt's. I had 3 law firms, big law firms, working for my financial services firm years ago. That's what you do. You have high-profile law firms, to look into various things for you and represent you. Anyway, it's a story for a different day. Let's get into this. This is what we're talking about. Dan Neidle claims that the wages and tax transcript that I received, and so did thousands of other Matrix Freedom members in 2025, is a fantasy. He says it doesn't prove anything, it doesn't mean anything. That's what he says. And so he's gone from it's fraud to looking at the information. He doesn't want to debate the technical side. He's now saying that the proof that I have given him isn't real, it's fantasy. And that proof is this. So this is the wages and tax transcript for Ian Clifford Trust, as you can see here, where my cursor is. And the bottom line is, this is from the IRS, this is a fax from the IRS. The bottom line is that is $4.477 million of taxes that is due back to the Ian Clifford Trust as a nominee, a grantor trust. A nominee for me, I am the living man, the grantor trust files a tax return. So let's get into the information. I've been asked to do this because a lot of people have read this document and have asked questions. A lot of the membership want me to explain it, so that's what I'm doing. So that's the amount of it's rounded out, it's rounded down actually. That's the amount of wages and tax transcript that confirms from the IRS, completely in accordance with IRS publication 1212, that the grantor trust that I had created, this is a 98 series international grantor trust, had received this wages and tax transcript confirming that the IRS had checked it all out. They've got an algorithmic system that checks out the A through Z of that tax recoupment, signature, credit, abandoned credit recoupment, and they had issued that wages and tax transcript to confirm that they were ready to pay it out. All they were waiting for was what's called a 1041 tax return to come from the trust, and then they would have paid out that 4.4 million to the bank account that had been detailed to them, and it would have been a FedWire transfer directly from the IRS to the grantor trust, the Ian Clifford Grantor Trust, by FedWire. And how do I know that? It's because it's happened with other of our members. So, what's it all about? Well, the short story is that there is no money of substance. There are only ledgers. Every time you make a bank payment, create a mortgage with your signature, get a loan or a credit card, you're creating the credit by depositing a negotiable instrument into an artificial system, which I call the Monopoly board. So I'm only going to do the short version because I've done this many, many times. You can come to ROS Media and you can play videos, or I've gone through it A through Z in great detail. There's Q&As, there's webinars, there's explanations, there's documents. So if you are intrigued on how this works and why it works, and why it's perfectly lawful, and why there's a massive opportunity to get involved in this. And if you are interested in recouping your signature credit from the age of 18, add it up, it's a massive amount, and then you can spend it and recoup it out of your grant or trust infrastructure, so that you never have to work again, you never have to run that business again. You will have an abundance because you are recouping your signature credit, which at the moment is being abandoned. So in 1933, the United States goes into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's well documented, HJR 192. James Trafficant reads out the speech. Now the United States is bankrupt, and the United States Treasury is the bankruptcy trustee for the entire artificial monopoly board. The person, which is a birth certificate construct, is put onto the artificial monopoly board as a banker under the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, or if you're in the US, it's UCC 3. Basically, the birth certificate construct artificial entity is now going to issue negotiable instruments, promises to pay in the future, or as the bankers call them, deposits. You're not moving money from one account to another. You are creating new credit with your signature every time you make a bank payment, every time you sign for a mortgage loan or credit card, or any deductions are taken where your signature is being used, any deposits where your signature is being used. Those deposits are basically signature credit. They go into the banking system. The banking system then securitizes them through the investment banks that predominantly operate in New York, in Wall Street, and then the banks who are operating as nominees for you, the living man, woman, they pay taxes to the United States Treasury for the use of your signature credit. Now, those taxes belong to you. They belong to you, not to the United States Treasury. Why? Because you, as a living man or woman, are a creditor to the bankruptcy of the United States. And it's all documented. I've gone through it through A through Z. You can read about it. You can hear me talk about it. It's not a myth. It's not a fantasy. It's 100% lawful. It's confirmed in the IRS tax manuals exactly how this works, if you understand what they're actually saying, which I do. So that is basically what's going on. Now, the taxes that are being paid by the investment banks for using your credit, they presume that they are what's called the holder in due course of the credit. The investment banks, that's what they presume. They're not. When a grant or trust that is being put on the monopoly board as a nominee under IRS publication 1212 files a tax return, files a 1099 OID followed by a tax return, the taxes which have been collected by the United States Treasury on the use of the credit, it belongs back to the grant or trust, which is now recognised in the United States tax system as the holder in due course of the credit, and is entitled, lawfully entitled, to the return of that abandoned credit, because it is signature energy and it's due back to the actual holder in due course that's been corrected by the 1099 OID filing that the grant or trust has done. That's basically it. There's a much longer version than that, much more detailed version of that. There's no money of substance, there's only these artificial deposits. People like Dan Neidle would never have learned about this, as I didn't. I'm chartered insurance qualified. I did 7 years of study in all areas of finances. Nobody teaches you this stuff. They don't want you to know it. Basically, it's all about negotiable instruments and ex nihilo credit creation. The Bank of England confirms that what I've just told you is true in their paper, Money in the Modern Economy. Professor Richard Werner, in multiple papers, confirms that it's true, and there are other technical references as well. So then let's just scoot through here a bit. The 98 Grant or Trust, Series Grant or Trust, it corrects the IRS's record under publication 1212, so that it becomes the holder in due course for the true creditor, which is the living man, woman, that is the beneficiary of the trust. The living man, woman cannot operate on the artificial monopoly board because it's artificial. The living man, woman is always going to be the creditor, the originator of the energy credit, which is the signature credit. Scoot through here a little bit more. Now, when the IRS issues a wages and tax transcript, which is this is a wages and tax transcript from the IRS. You can see this dated in 2025, 98 series in Ian Clifford OID Trust. When they issue that document, and they typically do it, you can see it online, they have an online system, but they also fax it if you ask them to. When they issue that, that means that they have checked out from A through Z, the origination, the signature origination, which bank was that signature originated with, that credit deposit was created with, that future, that promise to pay in the future negotiable instrument, which investment structure took that signature energy in as a securitization. It's got a CUSIP number within the framework of the investment security, how much tax is already being paid by the investment bank as a nominee or as a presumed nominee for the credit, and it's all checks out. And that once they've checked it all out, the IRS system, it's called the 810 algorithm. Once it's checked it all out and it's satisfied that the payer is real, the recipient is real, the signature credit was created in the way I've described, the securitization of the credit energy has the right reference numbers, there's sufficient taxes paid by the investment bank that's paid taxes for the use of that signature credit, and that tax is equal to or greater than the amount of the recoupment. So that in this case, that's $4.4 million of recoupment. Has the investment bank paid more than that in taxes through what's called the 945 tax module? That's the payer's tax module. If the answer to that is yes, then the IRS issues the wages and tax transcript to confirm that they are holding a recoupment, in this case of $4.4 million, waiting for it to be claimed by the 1041 tax return that the trust, the 98 series grantor trust, would file, which is what we were just about to do for 600 million of recoupments that have been confirmed with the same wages and tax transcripts as we've seen here. So Dan Neidle says that that's all fantasy. I say it's not. I say that when we go to court in the United States, which will be a United States court where Neidle will be a defendant for a 100 million claim that he undermined the share of those 600 million recoupments that would have gone to the Old Souls Nation, a Panama foundation that I created to finance the infrastructure for the Old Souls Nation, the independent infrastructure I mentioned earlier, power, water, food, communications, travel, etc., etc., etc. 20% of the recoupments goes to the Old Souls Nation to finance its infrastructure. So the Old Souls Nation Panama Foundation will be making a claim against Dan Neidle for him undermining all of these recoupments through his vicarious liability, because he's put all of these blogs out and because he tortuously interfered with all of the various contracts between all the various parties that were expecting the 600 million. 20% of that 600 million was going to go to the Old Souls Nation. So he undermined it with his blogs. Amy Sanger sabotaged it because of Dan Neidle's blogs. Now, if there hadn't been sufficient taxes paid by the taxpayer, that's the investment bank that is using the signature credit, then there would have been a freeze. It's called an 810 refund freeze because the IRS has this algorithm, and there wasn't a freeze on the 600 million because we checked it all out. We have a system to check it all out, etc., etc. It's described in this section. And to put some more colour on it, if the IRS doesn't pay out and it's all been verified, if there's some reason why they still don't pay out the signature credit, then you can command, the trustee can command the IRS to move taxes from other tax modules of the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the investment banks, to the 945 tax module, which is the one that is going to fund the recoupments there, this module here, the 945 tax module. So if the investment bank hasn't paid enough taxes under their 945 tax module, the trustee for the grantor trust that's filed the 1099 OID can command the IRS under this 2002 2002 26 Form 1120 to command the IRS to move taxes from one tax module to another one, so that there's enough to make the recoupment, finance the recoupment that's been blocked because there isn't enough credit. Now, if you then look at, well, what are we talking about? Here are some investment banks, JP Morgan Chase, in between 2022 and 2025, the average of their 945 tax payments to the United States Treasury was 138 million, but they actually paid on average per year 37 billion in other taxes. So those taxes can be moved from this tax module into this tax module to finance the recoupments as HSBC. 337 million in 945 taxes, 13.1 billion in other taxes. These taxes can be moved over to this module to then finance the recoupments that have been filed through the 1099 OID corrective filing under IRS publication 1212. I won't go through all of these, you can read this if you're interested. And then what happens to the recoupments when they come into the tax filing grantor trust is that then the share that is due to the member goes to another international grantor trust, which is called the Asset Fortress Protocol. This becomes the private treasury with its own banking facility. That trust with its own bank account spends those funds and recoups, spends and recoups. That's the cycle of spending and recouping. It's all explained in here. Now, if for any reason the IRS algorithm freezes the return for whatever their reasons are, then you can file under this, under here, you can file, or the trustee can file, I think it's described at the back of the report, you can file basically an instruction to recoup the credit under a federal lawsuit against the IRS, and if it's blocked for any unlawful reason by the IRS. So the evidence of the 600 million is all in with the electronic filing officer. There's a licensed electronic filing officer who files the tax returns for the members, grantor trust. All the proof is there. It will all be disclosed in the lawsuit against Dan Neidle. He has been given this proof. He's been given statements from me. There will be affidavits in the case, and there will be forensic evidence available. It's all confirmed in this report here, the technical reasons why the 600 million is absolutely verified as real recoupments that should have come through. And because of the sabotage, the electronic filing officer, who's a licensed IRS tax filing officer with all the right credentials and tax filing software, has filed what's called a TIGA report with the IRS. That is an investigations report to investigate why Amy Sanger and how she filed these fraud reports and undermined all the recoupments. That's currently under investigation. That's Amy Sanger's fraudulent use of identity fraud reports where there was no identity fraud. That's currently being investigated. So if it's all tax fraud, Dan Neidle, if you're watching this, why would WK file a TIGA fraud report to the IRS reporting Amy Sanger's fraud if what he was doing was fraud? He'd be putting himself right in the firing line for the IRS to come down on him, because he is the licensed tax preparer, why would he file a fraud report against Amy Sanger and others if he was committing fraud? He knows he's not committing fraud. He's read my research. He's very happy to file the tax returns on behalf of the members. He's got a professional tax practice. Why on earth would he file thousands of tax returns in the way I've just described if he believed them to be fraud? And then why would he file a fraud report to the IRS about what Amy Sanger did because of what Dan Neidle's blogs were convincing her to believe? Why would you file a fraud report? You wouldn't do that if you were the tax preparer unless you were very confident that what you're doing is perfectly lawful, which WK, the tax preparer, is very, very confident. So the conclusion is that there's abundance of proof of this process being real. It's been verified. All the evidence is there. Dan Neidle is the one who's having a fantasy. He's fantasizing that what I have designed here doesn't work because he doesn't know about it. He doesn't understand it. He's way out of his depth technically. And his only line of defence now is to say that the proof that he's got that's been sent to him is a fantasy. Well, it isn't. It's absolutely provable evidence. It will be supplied to the US courts as evidence of the amount of funds which should have been coming to the members. 20% of those funds should have been going to the Old Souls Nation. There is forensic proof that that is all real. No matter what Dan Neidle says, he can call it a fantasy if he wants. It's 100% true and provable. Thank you for